Chapter 6, the 10 primary dimensions. Mass, electromagnetism, space, time, math, qualia. With these 6 things, we can measure everything. And by proxy, for anything that is claimed to exist, a dimensionalist should provide a measuring test that is falsifiable, replicatable, and free of simpler causal explanations. If such a test is not provided alongside a claim, usually the claim should be dismissed. For claims that are asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence, and when the evidence is questionable, question it profusely. For the next few paragraphs, I will be summarizing part 2 of the final chapter. I'm sure it wouldn't make sense for me to say, "There are 10 dimensions!" without clearly defining what they are. After breaking down the fundamental constants into the primary dimensions, the inevitable conclusion from the knowledge at my disposal was that there are only 4 primary dimensions that make up our physical reality beyond the quantitative realm. There is mass, electric current, length, and time. These dimensions cannot be broken down and made to appear as a sum of any of the other primary dimensions, hence their primacy. This is what distinguishes a primary dimension from a secondary dimension. For example, joules are a secondary dimension of energy and can be expressed in terms of mass times length squared divided by time squared. The reason why there are not 7 primary dimensions like the 7 base units in the current SI system is that the 3 missing base units can be expressed in terms of the 4 primary dimensions, just like energy. The dimensions of the candela are equal to the hertz times watts divided by steradian, which can be condensed to mass times length squared divided by time to the 4th power. And the dimensions of the mole is equal to the quantity of matter. Matter is commonly accepted to be defined as, and defined here as, anything that has mass and takes up volume. So the dimensions of a mole are equal to Q times mass times length cubed. And the dimensions of temperature are equal to kinetic energy divided by matter. Temperature is defined here as the average kinetic energy of the particles of a substance. So then the dimensions of temperature can be equal to Q divided by length times time squared. Now that the number of physical primary dimension types have been counted as 4, how many of each dimension are there? 6 is the bare minimum we need to adequately explain everything, adding a mass and an electric dimension to Minkowski's and Einstein's 4D spacetime, a mass-electric spacetime. Can I just stop here for a second and brag about how metal that name for our observable universe sounds? Oh yeah, I was just taking a leisurely stroll on a remote inhabited planet of mass-electric spacetime, when suddenly a tiger emerged from an earthquake-induced crack in the ground. The tiger looked at me in the eye and said, "Come, conscious creature of mass-electric spacetime, jump on my back with that guitar of yours and let's fly to a distant, unexplored moon." Metal! Anyways, back to counting beyond the 6 dimensions. However, it can be further deduced that both the electric and the time dimensions have at least one additional dimension. For electric currents, electromagnetic waves travel at 90 degrees alongside each other. We cannot explain both the magnetic field and the electric field with a single dimension. We need 2 to encompass both of these phenomena. The second time dimension is observed on the quantum level. If we cannot perfectly predict quantum events and there is simply a probability distribution, then causality over time cannot be fixed in a single dimension and would require an additional degree of freedom to account for this uncertainty. Thus, time as we perceive it is a continuously observed collapse of the wave function, rather than a determinate timeline. Quantum or macro event X would always lead to quantum or macro event Y in a single dimension of causality, and this does not appear to be the case. To conclude this chapter, there is only one mass dimension, which we call the Higgs field. There are 2 electromagnetic dimensions, which make up the electromagnetic field. There are 3 length dimensions, which consist of height, width, and depth in space. And there appears to only be 2 time dimensions from which we can deduce from observations. Anything beyond this would be pure speculation at the moment. I have decided to name these multiple time dimensions the causality field. This implies that we live in an 8-dimensional physical plane of existence. Even though we can only observe 7 physical dimensions in our day-to-day universe, the whole of the physical multiverse is 8-dimensional, assuming electromagnetism is incapable of being reduced to 1 physical dimension. Then beyond the physical plane, all mathematical dimensions are included as one necessary type of dimension to supplement physical reality. We could say that there is the real and the imaginary, two math dimensions, but they both can work under similar imagined premises. Then all other language-derived / qualia dimensions are added as one necessary type of dimension to supplement physical reality. All adjective-based qualitative descriptors likewise work under the same ideal premises of language that is irreducible to ones and zeros. We could try, but there is almost always some nuance that is lost. To describe the universe, we have to use our mouth words. D0, Q1, Q1, M1, E2, L3, T2. 10.